So the war in Syria has been going on for a long time, many years. Over 250,000 dead right now, which is a giant number. And of course, thousands upon thousands of those are children. Well, Aleppo is a major city in Syria, and it has been under siege for a long time, bombarded through and through. 2 million people living in Aleppo. Different parts of the city are under siege, largely by the Syrian government and to some degree by the Russians. Well, recently there was a bombing run, and the house of 5-year-old Omran Daqneesh was hit. And now people are seeing the image that you're looking at next to me here, and they're heartbroken over this because he's a 5-year-old. He got pulled out of the rubble. Thank God he's alive. And one thing that people are noting is that he's so literally shell-shocked that he's not even crying. At that point, of course, they didn't know what had happened to his parents. They miraculously survived, but many others did not in that bombing run. So I'm going to show you first a video of what happened that night, and credit to the people who originally got this video from on the ground. You'll see them right here. So I've got a son who just turned 6, so you know, very similar in age to Omran. Seeing that is just really, really hard to look at. But I want you to look at it because that's the reality on the ground. Now, what we should do about that is a different question and a very, very difficult question, and one we're going to tackle in a second. But I want you to know, of course, it's not just Omran. There's, you know, you can find pictures nonstop online, obviously, of kids who have been hit by these bombs, and obviously you're not even seeing all the ones that have been killed in the bombing. But now I want to give credit here to CNN's Kate Bolden. And by the way, that video was from AMC through CNN. And so Bolden here is going to explain what happened. She gets a little emotional, but that's not a bad thing. You know, if you work in news, you should care about the news. And the fact that she does and she's moved by it, I think is a great thing. And it gives the audience at home a little bit better sense of what's actually happening on the ground. So I wanted to share that with you.
According to activists, this is Omran. He lives with his mom, his dad, and his brother and his sister. Their home is inside Aleppo, Syria. It was hit by a bomb, an airstrike. Who's behind it, we do not know. He and his family were pulled alive from what's left of their home after being buried in the rubble. Omran is left inside that ambulance, alone, bloodied, as rescuers go back into the rubble looking for anyone else who may have survived. His family did. In 5 years of war, more than 250,000 people have lost their lives. That includes 4,500 children in Aleppo alone. Millions more displaced without a home. Now that includes Omran. And what strikes me is we shed tears, but there are no tears here. He doesn't cry once. That little boy is in total shock. He's stunned inside his home one moment and the next, lost in the flurry and the fury of war and chaos. At least 3 people were killed by this bomb in this neighborhood. This is Omran. He's alive. We wanted you to know.
The part that gets me is when he turns his head and you see his wound, and as a parent, you see blood coming out of that wound, and it's hard to look at. But we as a world should not divert our eyes. So she mentioned about how he wasn't crying. Well, Dr. Zahir Salul lives in Chicago, but he goes into Syria and risks his life to treat the people of Aleppo because there just isn't that many doctors left. Hundreds of doctors have been killed in Aleppo, and He dodges snipers, the bombs, etc., leaves the comforts of the suburbs of Chicago to go treat these kids because somebody's got to. And he pointed to a picture that really shook me. This is done by a young kid, and what he pointed out in the article in The Guardian is you see the helicopters dropping the bombs. The living are crying, and the dead are smiling. So that's the state of Syria right now. Look, I want to talk about what can be done about this. So first off, we keep telling you, just dropping bombs from the sky, it's an easy answer, but it's not necessarily the right answer. In this case, it's not us. We're not the ones dropping those bombs, at least in Aleppo. It's, like I said, mainly the Syrian government and the Russians. The Russians claim they're going after ISIS, but in reality, they're going after any of the Syrian government's opponents because they're allied with the Syrian government. So the Syrian government has killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. By the way, their opponents are also oftentimes monsters. One of their opponents is ISIS. So there are no easy answers here. But as I look at Omran and I think about what I would do if my kids were endangered, and I had all the power in the world, I'm the United States of America, what do I do? What do I do to help that kid? Well, we got to be smart. So first off, dropping bombs from the sky, as you can tell, doesn't necessarily help them. So first off, we have got to spend so much more money on intelligence. I know that, spending money, it seems like another easy answer. And boy, it seems like we probably pour a lot of money into intelligence. But look at all the money that we pour into the bombs. These all cost millions of dollars, and all the jets and all the military stuff. And then we drop them, or in this case, the Russians and the Syrians dropped them into the middle of the cities. I don't think they were targeting Omran either. They just dropped them blindly. We dropped them semi-blindly. We need much better intelligence to actually target the people that we're going after, because the more you hit the Omrans of the world, the more you turn the population against you. By the way, that's why Syria is in the middle of a civil war, because their government started dropping bombs indiscriminately, and whatever support they might have had turned against them in a lot of the areas of Syria, certainly the ones that are opposed to them already for reasons of religion and sects and tribes. So now we're in the middle of a bigger conflict. So you need intelligence, and it's much more important than simple raw military power. Secondly, you need to push the bad guys out from underneath, because if you want to get justice or even vengeance, the way to do that is to have the local population support you. If they do not support you, they will not hand those guys over to you. So you actually have to be decent, maybe even great, to the local population, so they have an incentive to support you, not to fight you. And so they have an incentive to turn over the bad guys. Of course, it's not that simple. It's not like, hey, I go over there and I hand out candy, and all of a sudden they turn over all the bad guys. It's a long, hard process. And especially in a place like Syria, where we do not have a lot of allies, it's not easy. But we cannot give up. The answer isn't to do nothing. The answer isn't just blindly bombing and hoping for the best, because that's definitely not working. The answer is we've got to be smart. And remember, we once did this. We once figured this out. And that's part of what made America great. It was called the Marshall Plan. And we turned our biggest enemies, the Germans, who had just launched a war against us, the Nazis, and the Japanese, who had bombed Pearl Harbor, into our arguably our top two allies in the world. How did we do it? By being overwhelmingly decent to them after the war. Yes, there are complexities. Yes, it was after the war. This is in the middle of a war. And Syria is an even harder situation than a situation like we had in the beginning with Iraq. But look at what we did in Iraq and what the Shiite government did in Iraq. Instead of after the war saying, hey, Sunnis, we will spend just as much money in Sunni areas as Shiite areas, the Shiite government said, no, now we're in charge, we're going to crush the Sunnis. What happened instead? The Sunnis said, okay, then we're going to fight you. And who were they? That turned into ISIS. So violence begets violence. It's easy. The pundits will go on TV and say, bomb, bomb, bomb. More war is the answer. All we have is hammers, so all we see is nails. Well, Omran isn't a nail. Those families down there are real. They're human beings. So don't hammer them. Find out a better way. There is a better way. It's harder and it takes a longer time, and we need to be smarter. But we can do it. We have done it in the past, and it is incumbent upon us to help those in need, but to do it in a way that is not counterproductive, but that actually helps those kids down there. That's my proposal.